Lived and worked in Europe and America, and I don't have to make allowances for Kwekwanansi. When I'm working here in Ghana, I have to make allowances for Kwekwanansi. Why should the person who is using language rhythmically, why should the best one in the world not come from here? To me, it makes complete sense that Sarkodie is one of the best rappers in the world. No bar, no cap. Music doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I think now I have made the transition from a young music maker to an older music shaper.
He's a cultural force and a pioneer in Ghana's music and art scene. I'm talking about Panji Anoff, the man who said hip-hop is African.
Even though it is not very obvious to us because we are Africans, when white people look at hip-hop, all they see is Africa.
Today, I'm going to be speaking with one of Ghana's legendary creative cultural shift makers. His name is Panji Anoff, and he has been at the forefront of making change when it comes to music, entertainment, and the creative arts here in Ghana. For probably over 3 decades, he has been a cultural pioneer. And I'm excited to talk to him today because one of the things I think is very important is giving people their flowers while they're still with us. And he's one of the people that I wanted to talk to just to hear more about what he's done here in Ghana and what's to come. I want to dive into who you are because some people may not know. I came to know who you are through the late 90s with the Highlife music. And for people watching who may not know what Highlife is, it is a genre of music from Ghana that blended hip hop with the Highlife style of music from Ghana. Now, I had heard you in an interview once say that hip hop is African because hip hop celebrated its 50 years. I think it was last year, and it was either last year or the year before. They celebrated their 50-year anniversary, and there are all kinds of celebrations going on, and even one that happened here. And one thing that you've reiterated is that hip hop is African. So first, introduce yourself as to what you've done in music, and then why you think hip hop is African.
Well, my name is Panji Anoff. I am a producer, even though I studied mechanical engineering. And as a child, I dreamt of being an agricultural engineer, bringing food or mechanizing agriculture to feed my country. As I got older, I realized my interest lay much more in the arts. And so even though I'd spent a lot of time by then on one path, I realized it was time to change path. So I became a journalist, I became a writer, I became a music producer, film producer. Part of what inspired me to pursue a career in the arts is hip-hop. Because for me, hip-hop was the most African form of music I've ever heard.
Because even though it is not very obvious to us because we are Africans, when white people look at hip-hop, all they see is Africa. Everything about hip-hop is African. It's like they don't call it music, they call it a beat. Give me a beat. I heard this guy rapping over this beat. And that beat is a drum beat. With hip-hop, it's the drums that matter. Of course, every other things matter, but hip-hop allowed music to focus back onto the African aesthetic. Drums and voices.
And it's not just the music, it's the culture. So the culture of hip-hop came and, it's about crews and it's about dancing. And you form a circle and you take turns going into the center and everybody around you encourages you. And when you are in the center of that, or, when you are the center of attraction from a group of dancers, somehow your ability level increases and everybody takes turn. And these were things which we had done in Ghana as children, and I'd seen adults do. It's not only a children's thing, but the essence of hip hop, that music is not about melody or complex chords, but music is about rhythm and harmony. and words. So hip hop came along, and hip hop no longer had, it's not, oh, this is a hip hop instrumental. It's called a beat, because the beat is the essence of what it is. It's just, I mean, there were hip hop songs which had only drums, and the only other place in the world where you could find music made up of drums and voices is right here in West Africa. So when hip hop came along, I realized, the entire world is moving closer to where I come from. And therefore, this is probably the right time to try and contribute, because whether you realize it or not, you are referencing my culture, and I know my culture probably better than you do. So Hip Life really is just, one step beyond that. It's not only unique to Ghana, but when, I guess sometime between the late 70s and the early 90s, hip hop started to dominate everything. It dominated music, of course, but, graffiti became a new font and hip hop style, hip hop clothes really influenced everything in the globe. But the problem for most people outside of America is that when people adopted hip hop as a culture, they adopted the American language with it. So even in England, people were rapping with American accents. And indigenous hip hop in England did not pick up until the artists dropped the American accents, dropped the American references, and started rapping in British English, started talking about British things. There's a famous song called How's Life in London, which was one of the first big British hip-hop hits. And funny enough, one of the members of that group has Ghanaian roots. So I saw that and I realized I love hip-hop, but I would like to domesticate hip-hop. And how do you domesticate hip-hop? By trying different sounds and different languages and different rhythms. So Ghana has hundreds of rhythms. Let's say from 1978, 79, when I started listening to hip-hop, till maybe the early 90s, I think I had heard a maximum of 3 or 4 different rhythms being used in hip-hop. Today, hundreds of rhythms have been used in hip-hop, and it's primarily because of the African influence, or at least the global influence. So I think all these contributions have only made hip-hop richer. And so, a lot of the work I did was here in Ghana, especially between 1992 and 1995, when I spent a lot of time here in Ghana working with artists. And, I tried to record demos for any artists that I felt were domesticating hip-hop. Those days you recorded the demo onto tape. There were CDs, but CDs were not something you could do at home. Or, there was no MP3s. Well, Napster had kind of began, but...
Yeah, but that was the late 90s. Napster, that was like, 98, 99, kind of?
The very first MP3 format had started to appear, but it wasn't... So, early 90s, we were still dealing with tapes and records. So actually, the first Hip Life I recorded was, I'd say late. So I'm not talking about beats that I made, because between 1990 and, maybe 1993, I guess, I'd made over 100 beats sampling only African records. So it was Fela, it was Osibisa. Okay, there were a couple of non-African records, but it was a group like Mandrill who were in America trying to make Osibisa kind of music. So, I'd made 100 beats sampling only African records, maybe in part to show that, look, you can sample African records and make hip-hop, or what to me was my idea of hip-hop. And I knew it wasn't everybody's idea of hip-hop. But it was only in maybe 93, 94 that I got artists to start rapping on some of those beats and recording music. Talking drums here in Ghana were very successful because one of their songs called Aden, we made a video to it and it was played on all the local TV stations. There were only 2 or 3 at the time. And that was also very indigenous, both in terms of music and in terms of style.
The rebirth of Afrocentrism when I give them, I live them. Drop you off on wheel chopper river. I never have.
Everyone was dressed in batakaris, which is my own personal favorite. And the reason why I like batakaris is because if I spend $50 on a batakari, $50 of that money is staying in Ghana. Sometimes thread is imported, but I have batakaris which are made from traditional local thread. So if there is a garment which is produced entirely within Ghana, buying it pumps money into the Ghanaian economy. If I buy, a Louis Vuitton shirt, literally I'm just exporting money out of the country. Mm-hmm. So I think our tastes must be economically influenced, because if my taste means my children are going to be paupers, then it's a foolish choice that I've made. So we can't spend the next 50 years supporting European and American designers and not supporting our own, because over that 50-year period, there will have been such a big net flow of wealth from here to there that we might never be able to recover it. So my taste in everything is to some extent defined by the environment that I would like my children or my grandchildren to live in, and on sustainability, because it's not sustainable for Ghanaians to import everything we consume. Where are we going to get the money to buy it if we're importing everything we consume? And we see already it's a huge problem in Ghana. I mean, we import tomatoes from Burkina Faso. What does Burkina Faso have for growing tomatoes that we do not have? Why is Burkina Faso, a country which most Ghanaians think of as relative desert, why can they not only become self-sustainable in producing tomatoes, but exporting tomatoes to Ghana? Ghana exports very little food. We export cash crops like, shea nuts and cocoa beans and cashew nuts, but we don't export much food because we don't even grow enough food. Mm-hmm. So why is growing enough food for ourselves to consume not on our personal agenda? Why is it not on our national agenda? And these are things that I think we can influence as artists or as creative people, because we alter people's tastes without even being aware of it. So is the reason why I chose the arts is because I knew I wasn't going to be a politician. But I think in life, you must try and impact your family, your children, but you must also try and impact the area around you. Mm-hmm. When I say impact, I mean positively. Sure, we can all impact negatively. It's easy to do. You can even do it without thinking. But I think we must all make a conscious effort to have a positive impact on our immediate family and on our community. Mm-hmm. So for me, that is a conscious effort. And the people making batakaris in Bolgatanga, I consider to be part of my community, and I would like to support them. Mm-hmm. So for me, that is where, also I don't like ironing. Batakaris don't need any ironing. So I love linen, but I don't have many linen clothes. Mm-hmm. Well, I have some linen clothes which are kind of crushed linen. They don't need ironing, but the ones that need ironing, I never wear. So I have stopped buying linen as much as I love linen. Just because it needs too much ironing, and I don't want to do that much ironing.
You are one of the people that I feel deserves to have their flowers. There's a lot of people that I find in Ghana that I've been meeting or reading about or following, and I feel like they don't get enough of the accolades that they should be getting for the contributions that they've made. So I wanted to be able to talk to you and present you to an audience, my audience, who some of them may not know who you are. Some may know, and they want to know an update about what you're up to. But today is about celebrating your contributions to the creative spaces in Ghana and Africa overall.
Well, thank you very much. I think the only reason why we fight for accolades is because historically this industry hasn't generated much money. If all of us were very wealthy, we wouldn't care about anybody's accolades. But if it's the biggest reward that you get for your life's work, I think, yes, for the creative sector, accolades are important because most of what we do is, at least maybe let me speak for myself, is if I create art, I'm trying to create art that will change the society that I live in. And I'm not trying to make any dramatic change. But I am trying to influence the way in which we see ourselves or the way in which we appreciate what we have. And so, yes, being recognized for trying to do it is very important to me. I don't think I am alone in this because I have met many Ghanaian creatives who I admire very much. And I realized that, yes, they've been phenomenally successful, but their success is usually in terms of the impact they've made, the lives they've touched, the people they've influenced, the people who they've encouraged to pursue those, let's say, interests or passions or professions. But financial success has not been, or I wouldn't say financial success is very up there with the rest of their achievements. So I think it's not a uniquely Ghanaian problem. But it is a post-colonial problem. In our post-colonial system, we have failed to acknowledge the value of many of the things which our colonial masters dismissed. So culture, music, indigenous religion, traditional morality, our ways of doing things. Because after 200 or 300 or 400 years of them being dismissed, our post-colonial response is often to continue. So I don't think we looked at colonialism and the end of it as an opportunity to reset our environment. For me, it's like we had a habit, and habits die hard. So colonialism ended, but the habits continued. One good example is our relationship with our public institutions. Under colonialism, we all stole and abused the public institutions. We have 60 years after independence, we have failed to appreciate that these institutions now exist for our benefit, and it is in our interest to make sure that they function properly. So, we all see the system as something we are constantly trying to beat rather than something we are trying to create or improve or grow. And I think this has cost us, in Ghana, for instance, a considerable amount. We are not developing or evolving as quickly as I think we have the capacity to. Because half of the change is ending the colonial legacy. And we still haven't done that. Because the colonial legacy empowered many people. They are now sitting at the top of society and they're not going to let their position go. It's like an empire in decline. The US might be losing its dominance after 50 or 100 years, but they're not going to give up easily. The same is true of the colonial thinkers that have continued to dominate. For instance, you can't become president of Ghana if you don't have a university degree. So that excludes many of our traditional rulers whose education was very different. It's their form of education had to do with the elders, had to do with the society they came from, but it wasn't academic. So by prioritizing a foreign educational system over our own, we lose a lot of indigenous knowledge. And that, I think, is a big shame.
Mm-hmm. What's some of the indigenous knowledge that you think that we need to know?
Medicine. The Ministry of Health, until quite recently, didn't even spend 1 cedi on traditional medicine. The entire budget went to Western medicine. Now, considering Western medicine is a relatively new introduction to Ghana, why doesn't our Ministry of Health invest in medicine which we can produce locally? Most of it is herbal medicine. We can grow it and process it locally. So this is one area where I think, if you look at how much money the Ministry of Health spends every year, it's millions and millions and millions. If the Ministry of Health were to put 30% of that budget towards traditional medicine, that traditional medicine would grow and evolve. And who knows, in 5 or 10 years' time, we too might have produced some medicines which are wanted all over the world. But we have the Center for Scientific Research into Plant Medicine. Why are the products of the Center for Scientific Research into Plant Medicine, why are they not the de facto cures offered in all our government hospitals? If I get malaria or typhoid, I use a medicine from Mampong Center for Scientific Research into Plant Medicine. But no doctor in Kolebu will recommend it. No doctor in 37 will recommend it. No doctor in Ridge Hospital will recommend it. They'll recommend Western medicines which we import. So what's the point of CSIR? Not CSIR. Oh, well, Ghana has many CSIRs into numerous things. But what's the point of these institutions if the idea is not to downstream them? So everybody in Ghana who gets malaria or typhoid can probably be treated cheaper with local medicine. And this is a bill that ends up with our government. So, that's one example of traditional knowledge which we have invested some money into, but when it comes to practicalizing it and making the money back, we fail to do so. Because how many of our doctors in Ghana have any knowledge of traditional medicine at all? In fact, many doctors poo-poo traditional medicine more aggressively than their European or American counterparts. Mm-hmm. In Germany, for instance, today in 2025, if you go to a doctor, he's got to offer you a pharmaceutical solution, and he's also got to offer you a non-pharmaceutical solution. Doctors are required to do so by law. You're the patient, you choose what you think will work best for you. In Ghana, this is not the case. No doctors recommend, herbal medicine. Or another thing is, I say, lifestyle change. Sometimes the only medicine you need is a change in your lifestyle. Forgive me if I am a little critical of doctors. It's because my own father was a doctor, and perhaps he was more progressive than most. But still, spending a lot of time with doctors makes me realize they are some of the most colonized minds we have. Because if I take my father, may he rest in peace, he's no longer here, so he can't punish me for criticizing him. But until the age, or until his 20s, my father had not really been exposed to Western medicine, right? Every illness or sickness he got as a child was treated with local solutions. Mm-hmm. But by the time he graduated as a doctor, and my father studied medicine in England, his upbringing had been replaced by Western medicine. And how did my father forget everything that happened to him in the first 20 years of his life? Mm-hmm. Because he's been taught something else. Mm-hmm. Our traditional architecture, if you've ever spent a night in a traditional mud and thatch house, you will realize how beautiful it is in terms of how it deals with the heat and the cold, right? So how have we completely abandoned traditional architecture and replaced it with concrete buildings with tiny windows? It's some of these architects are simply taking, designs from Europe, and transplanting them into Africa without thinking about, do we need more windows? Do we need to allow the air to blow through this building? Are we trying to keep the cold out, which is I would say is the number one priority of a European architect, is how do I keep the cold out in winter? We build buildings as if we're trying to keep the cold out. So I think we don't balance our education with our traditional knowledge. And part of the reason is because there are no traditional languages in our schools. There's no traditional music in our schools. There's no traditional history in our schools. There's no traditional culture in our schools. And so we totally separate education from our culture and our tradition. All we need to do is introduce learning in local languages into our primary schools. All we need to do is reintroduce traditional music into our primary schools, and our children will once again start to associate their culture with the entire tradition of acquiring knowledge. If you separate all knowledge acquisition from my language, I will assume everything in my language has nothing to do with knowledge, which is where we are now. And I think we don't have, 100 years to solve the problem, because all of our traditional knowledge will be lost by then. So how do we preserve our traditional knowledge if we are doing nothing to encourage our children to adopt it, right? So education and our colonial educational system, no vernacular. Can you imagine going to a school in Germany and they say you're not allowed to speak German in the school? It's insanity.
Yeah.
Right? It's why does a child have to learn a new language in order to go to school? Right? There's nothing wrong with learning another language whilst you're at school. But the moment you say to me, once I walk in these school gates, I cannot use my traditional language and I must use a language which I'm only starting to learn. How do you teach a child in a language they don't understand, right? So these are fundamental problems, how we have distanced who we are from what we want to become, right? What we want to become should have an element of who we were. Otherwise, we are saying everything about where we came from is wrong, right? If we are not going to take anything from the past into the future, basically we are saying our past was diabolical. And I don't believe our past was diabolical.
Now, what are you working in now? Because I know you're still part of the conversation when it comes to the creative arts in filmmaking, producing. You're not so much doing a lot of music anymore, are you?
Well, I've been working on, I still do quite a little bit of mixing and mastering for other artists, but myself as a producer, I have been working on one project which for me is very important because it's a Highlife project. I don't think Highlife is a music of the past. I think Highlife is a music of the future. But just like reggae has evolved from ska and mento to reggae and dancehall, I think Highlife needs to take a similar path. So Hip Life is, a bastard child of Highlife, for want of a better word. But there are elements of Highlife for which there is still a lot of space in the future. So when I look at Afrobeats, people say, oh, Afrobeats doesn't draw that heavily on our musical culture or tradition. And I disagree totally. They don't use the same instruments, right? But if you listen to an Afrobeat song, the vocal phrases sound like the horns of E.T. Mensah or the Ramblers or Rosibisa. The rhythms, there's no Highlife guitar in there, but the melodies resemble what somebody might play on a Highlife guitar. So I think Afrobeats has been very heavily influenced by our Highlife tradition.
I think it's really interesting that you're saying it's the music of the future. It's also for the future, not just the past. I was recently in an Uber and I wanted to play an old Highlife song. I just wanted to see if he had Bluetooth on his phone. It was Victor Uwaifo, Guitar Boy. And so I started playing it, and the driver said to me, he was probably in his late 20s, early 30s. He said, "This music is terrible." He said, "It's old. This is old music. Who listens to this anymore?" And I said, "You clearly don't understand the power of this music to the music you're listening to today."
Well, in some ways, um,
He said it was noise too. Sorry, he said it
well,
was noise.
well, in some ways, you see, it is the responsibility of every generation to forge their own path. So part of forging that path is rejecting the tastes of your parents.
Right.
Right? So I think that, it's a natural process in every teenager is you want to try and find an alternative to all the things that your parents love, right? It's just part of growing up.
You have a point.
And it's a powerful fuel for evolution and development and progress, especially in the arts, where we are always trying to push boundaries and find new fertile grounds. So I do understand that. But the thing is, he might be one example, and he might not, or he might even just be making a social point in rejecting it just to show that he belongs to a different generation. But the thing is, there is the fact that if you take Ghanaian recordings or Nigerian recordings from the 50s or the 60s, quality-wise, they don't compare with Jamaican recordings from the 50s or the 60s or even the 70s. So you can take a Jamaican record from the 50s or the 60s or the 70s and play it in a nightclub today, and it sounds fine. If you take a Ghanaian record from the 60s and you play it in a nightclub today, it doesn't sound fine because it doesn't have those dynamic elements. So the reason why the Jamaican records have it is because actually the entire world has moved towards the way Jamaicans recorded and presented music.
And how is that?
Well, since there is a statistic that Jamaicans didn't record music indigenously until the late 40s, right? In the late 40s, in the early 50s, Jamaicans started recording the music they were making, and they put a lot of emphasis on the bottom end of the music, the so-called drum and bass. So the bass in a Jamaican record is big, the kick in a Jamaican record is big, and that influenced the sound of the South. It influenced the sound of hip hop. So since Jamaicans started recording music, the average amount of bass in a song has increased 500 times. So you go back and listen to recordings from the 1920s, there is almost no bass in them. And a modern record like, house music, dance music, reggae, hip hop, Afrobeats has a phenomenal amount of bass in it. And our old Highlife records didn't have even, a tiny fraction of that bottom end which modern sound systems provide. So part of my Highlife experiment is, just taking some beautiful Highlife songs, recording them with modern dynamics, and then seeing whether they will find space alongside other music. So this is an old Highlife song, but now it's been recorded like a modern song. Will DJs play it on the dance floor? And I believe the answer often is yes. I think, but so, I'm working on, I would say, some conventional or old school Highlife, and I'm also working on, more contemporary, more modern Highlife, which, for me is hip life or Afrobeats. it's the same format, it's the same formula. It's just that sometimes the tools and the way it's expressed changes, but the essence remains the same.
So you're working on this for other artists?
Yes. I always work as a producer. I find the right artist to complement the songs. On this particular project I'm working on, I'm trying to get artists from other parts of Africa involved, and Europe and the diaspora. So I'm not limiting myself to Ghanaian artists alone. I am trying is if I present a good songwriter with a beautiful piece of high life music, what can they do with it? So it's a lot about that.
Who are some of the artists that you would like to work with in the continent or in the diaspora? Is there anybody that you want to reach out to?
I mean, I don't exclude anybody, because I don't know who is interested in what the essence of high life has to offer. But I mean, some of the artists I've been working with so far are, what you might. I mean, they're young contemporary artists. I'm not limiting myself to any age. I'll work with all ages, but I do think there's a lot of energy that young people have, and for the most part, music has always been created by young people. The production process very often involves older people. So if you think about the Beatles, they had Sir George Martin, who was 20 or 30 years their senior, and often called the fifth Beatle because of the contribution that he made. You think about Michael Jackson, there's Quincy Jones. So, I mean, music has never been, music doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I think now I have made the transition from, a young music maker to an older music shaper. So I am much better at shaping music than I am at coming up with the ideas, whereas 30 years ago, there were millions of ideas in my head and I expressed many of them, but now I have a certain level of experience and practice and trial and error that just allows me to shape things much more quickly. So I think that is my primary strength, and I don't want to be stuck in the same place, but I want to do what I think I am best positioned and best suited to do. So yes, it's music, but now I'm, much more, I help people to find their own voices. My own voice is not so important to me anymore.
What do you think is missing in this generation when it comes to really tapping into their true sense of authentic creativity when they're making music, or if they're doing fashion or they're painting? Is there anything that you think is missing in this generation?
Representation is what I think is missing, because if I turn on my phone right now and I look for fashion, 99% of the fashion I'll find online comes from elsewhere. So young people will look at their phones and they'll see a much stronger foreign influence than they'll see a local influence. And, our local flavor is very often is the most unique component of what it is that we are trying to create. So if we lose that uniqueness, there's a South African saying that says local is lekker, and that has always resonated in my head, is that I don't want to be the best composer of Austrian chamber music. I want to leave that to them. There's somebody who is Austrian who has lived and breathed that chamber music from the day he was born. Me too, I grew up in Accra, surrounded by, drumming and dancing, and Jama is a part of life. If we're going to go and play football, Jama, if it's somebody's dead, Jama, somebody's birthday, Jama, so it's I think it serves me best to play to my own strengths. The same applies to every young person coming up today. Often I tell young people, do you know how many Nigerian artists were doing R&B? There was a ton of them. Almost none of the Nigerian R&B songs ever came or were ever popular in Accra. But the moment Two-Face was singing You Are My African Queen, it wasn't, sure, it was kind of R&B influence, but it was a local song. Every girl who hears You Are My African Queen knows, Two-Face is singing that song to her. It's not intended for anybody else. It's intended for you, or it's intended for the girl in Two-Face's neighborhood that he's singing to. And all of a sudden, then Nigerian music became popular in Ghana, and it's You Are My African Queen that really opened the doors. So this was Two-Face being a typical Lagos boy and singing a love song. That is what connected with Ghanaians, not the Style Plus who were singing American R&B, right? So if we want to export something from an environment, it's got to represent that environment somehow. I can't export Austrian chamber music from Accra. I can export it from Austria. And sure, we live in a global world, but I think that person sitting in Austria is always going to be better than I am going to be. And I also think if it comes to understanding rhythm or drumming, I'm also always going to be better than what they are. So I will play to my strengths. And an important component of our strength is language. You see, one thing about music is everybody has heard I love you in a song 1 million times. But they haven't heard Medo, right? And you will notice that Medo is or became a popular phrase amongst Nigerians. It sounded fly to them because they hadn't heard it that many times. It's fresh, it's new. So I think language in itself enables you to do things in a way that the world has not heard. Sure, maybe the people in your area have heard it, but now we're in a global market. If Burna Boy is popular, he's not just popular in Port Harcourt or popular in Warri or popular in Lagos. He's popular in every corner of the globe. King Promise is popular in every corner of the globe. So what is King Promise going to take the globe that is unfamiliar to them? Language is one, rhythm is another, style is another, delivery, clothing, fabric, fashion. So I think we've really got to look at the elements that help to make our art unique and play to them.
It's interesting you say that because it makes me think about when Sarkodie was rapping in Tree, and I know that there were some people who were telling him that if he keeps rapping in Tree, he won't be successful, that he needs to only rap in English. But he continued with mixing it, and we even see now, I even see Black Sharif does that sometimes, adding in a little Tree here and there, and it gives that authenticity, that little bit of piece of Ghana that you're sharing with the world, that other people can learn some of the phrases from here, because we're always having people here learning the English all the time.
Yeah. And the most successful songs in 2023, 2024, I'd say is, sure, there's Water by Tyler, but then there's Ashake, there's Wizkid, there's Davido, there is Burna Boy. All of them use language as fluidly as,
Mix it up, yeah.
So a little Yoruba, some Hausa words thrown in here, a little Igbo, some English. It doesn't really matter because music is a universal language. And I know Nigerian phrases because of music. Mogbona feli feli, hot kukunte, right? I believe is what it means. And so, I mean, putting that into music it's not going to be a first, but somebody is sitting in Alaska And when they hear that, it will be the first time they're hearing this phrase, the first time. And it's not always about being the first time, but, it's something fresh always sounds good to our ears. So in the case of Sarkodie, I completely agree. It's, you don't need to rap actually, with rapping, it's much harder than with singing. Because with singing, there's the language, there's the melody, and it's usually quite slow. People don't really sing. So when it comes to rap, the language is more important because you want to understand what the person is saying. But still, the language is not the only thing, right? So if you take Ashake, half of Ashake's songs are, he really jumps between languages. It
Really?
didn't stop him from being, the most successful album in 2023 or 2024, so it's, I agree that, Sarkodie should do whatever feels right to him, and if it feels right to him, people will like it for what it is. It doesn't have to be, it's not, you can't go international if you don't rap in English. I think that is rubbish. The Despacito, what language is that in? That's the biggest song in the history of the world, right? Is Despacito in English? I don't think so. Because I don't know the word. I can sing it if it's playing, right? My kids know how to sing it, but English is not the beginning and the end of art. It never was, never will be, and I don't think we should force ourselves to express ourselves in mediums that we haven't mastered. So in order to sing a song in a language, you've got to master something. Either you've mastered the art of singing, because I've seen people singing songs they don't understand, and they're doing an incredible job.
True.
Right? And when you're singing the song, you even get the pronunciation right. So, it's the language doesn't define the song. So, I agree. Sarkodie, he can do whatever. Sarkodie is one of the, Sarkodie has some of the best timing of any rapper I've ever heard in my life.
He really does.
He does.
Like, he's so on point.
He's
Storytelling, while rapping on point onto the beat, like,
his timing is impeccable.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't surprise me. I should expect the best timing of any rapper in the world to come from West Africa, because rhythm is our thing, right? I don't expect, a rapper from somewhere else to beat us, because we probably have some of the strongest sense of rhythm in the world. It's right here in West Africa, even though it's exported to parts of the diaspora. So why should the person who is using language rhythmically, why should the best one in the world not come from here? To me, it makes complete sense that Sarkodie is one of the best rappers in the world. And, no bar, no cap. I'm not saying he's one of the best artists, but I'm saying when it comes to the timing of his rhythm and his lyricism, he is one of the best. It's not only good rap that makes good music. There are other things, So that's why maybe not every Sarkodie song is a big hit, even though his flow might be impeccable on each one. But there's many elements that make a song great. A good performance by an artist is one of them.
What advice do you have for young people in African countries who have the desire to go into the creative arts? And as you said in our conversation, it's not always financially rewarding.
Well, that's changing. The internet has changed the value of creativity. So I think, in the era of, everybody has a smartphone, there is TikTok, there is Instagram, there is YouTube, there is, Facebook, there's LinkedIn, there's whatever. I think all creative endeavors are getting monetized.
Better than in the past.
Better than in the past, yes. And you can monetize much smaller things. So if I wanted to monetize filmmaking 30 years ago, I only had one option. Make something 90 minutes long and take it to a cinema. How much is it going to cost me to make 90 minutes of a film? A huge, huge amount. Today I can create a 1-minute skit on my phone, and there's nothing stopping me from making money out of it, because I can monetize it on TikTok, I can monetize it on YouTube. There are channels. So not only are the formats that can make money, not only have they increased dramatically, the platforms for making money have also increased. So let's say me, for a lot of my life, I was a writer. I had a choice. I'm either writing books or I'm writing newspaper articles.
Yeah.
Yes, or what I ended up doing was writing for television, because it was more money for less work. But today, if you're a writer, you can write a blog, you can write short skits that anybody can. You don't need a television company or a commissioning editor to write for TV, because YouTube is TV, right? So I can write for YouTube and there's no gatekeepers between me and my final product. So I think the monetization of, creative endeavors has changed a lot in the last 20 or 30 years. And I do think people are getting better rewarded for their efforts. Until maybe 2019, 2020, I don't think I would have been able to say this year more than 10 African artists made $1 million from playing shows. But now it's, there are many artists who can make $1 million a year from touring.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge change. And it has been driven and fueled by us, because it's not the world music scene that created that opportunity. It's the domestic music scene. It's Afrobeats. It's hip life. That's where the change came from. So I do think things are much better now for this generation, and the way in which the job market will be changed by artificial intelligence means, many professions are going to lose a lot of the donkey work that needed to be done. So the donkey work was always done by the juniors. Okay, I just graduated as an architect. I'm going to work in an architect's office. The architect will give me all the, drawings and sketches. I mean, some of the donkey work he doesn't want to do. Now, many of those tasks will be replaced by automation. So the only architect that matters the most is the one right at the top of the food chain who is making those decisions and coming up with those concepts. Many of the ones between him and, the draftsman at the bottom, they'll disappear. So, I think my only advice to young people is, try and be fearless. It's easier to say than to do. But if you've got your mind set to something, or you think there is something you would like to do, don't be afraid of failure. Go out, try and do it. Give yourself 10 years to succeed or to fail. Because anything less than 10 years is, you haven't really tried. It's like somebody tells me, oh, I tried being, a musician and it didn't work, so I stopped. And it's like, how long? Oh, 1 year, 2 years. It's not enough time.
Yeah, it's not.
It takes 10 years to find out whether you're going to succeed or not. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you think about a conventional education, you spend 15 years in school, and they are teaching you to be literate. They are often not teaching you to do a job, or they're not teaching you a profession. So if you're going to spend 15 years in regular school, at least give yourself 10 years to learn what you are going to do for the rest of your life. And when I say learn, sure, you learn by practicing. So if at the end of 10 years you're not successful and you really think, Charlie, this is not working, okay, try something else over the next 10 years. But don't spend 1 year and say, oh, I tried it, I did my best, it didn't work. No, you've got to be, because 3/4 of success is consistency. 1 year, there's no consistency in 1 year. If you've been, and this is something I didn't understand when I was younger. is that to be successful, you just need to be consistent. I thought to be successful, you need to be the best, or you need to bring something new to the market, or you need to offer people something that doesn't exist. Sure, all those can help. But even if you have the best product in the world and you are not consistent, you are not going to be successful.
That is true.
So the key to success, it doesn't matter what field you're in, is consistency. It's like you imagine Papaya, every day they've been selling these chicken and fried rice meals for 20 years. If for 3 or 4 weeks their food is terrible, they will lose 20 or 30% of their business. So,
They have to be consistent.
Consistency is, being a professional is about being consistent. It's not about being gifted or exceptional. It's just about being able to deliver decent standards every single day. So it takes a long time to acquire that consistency, and it takes a long time for that consistency to make an impact on the market you're living and working in. So by the time it's made an impact, you're a successful business. I'd say, advice to young people, Charlie, just do your own thing. But within that, be consistent and don't give up, and be fearless, and realize it takes a while to become successful at anything.
Is there anything that you've done throughout your career that you got to a point where you felt like giving up? And if so, what did you do to overcome that hump?
When I'd say I put most of my energy into making music, I didn't realize it would take at least 10 years to be successful. Now I do. And I can look back at the 10 years of relative struggle as, being character building, it's the struggle that now gives me a sense of achievement looking back. But I think at some point, you look around and you think, is this ever going to happen? Or, I had drawn up some kind of plan and the timing of my plan was wrong. But, can I actually see the end game? And I think no matter what path you choose, there will be times when the end game or the destination is simply not clear to you. Sometimes it's because of the wood of the present. Sometimes it's just because you are getting close to it. It's just not as quickly as you thought. And so every human being, there are days when you will dwell on your failures rather than your successes. I think it's called depression, right? So everybody is going to go through, or every human being, I think we go through depression and exhilaration. It's part of the cycle of life. It's the same, up and down and up and down. I'm not afraid of the lows because I don't want to be afraid of the highs. So when the lows come along, I almost try to enjoy them because I think, this is a low point. It's going to last for a while. And then whether I like it or not, things are going to get better. So feeling that you are at the bottom of the world is not actually a bad place. There's nowhere to go but up. So I'm actually more afraid when, I'm riding on a crest of, because I know the only way is down, right? So, and I know there is no level of exhilaration which is permanently sustainable. Exhilaration lasts a few seconds or a few minutes or a few hours, but your own body can't take a permanent state of ecstasy. So when I'm ecstatic, the moment, for want of a better word, my eyes clear, then I think, now I better prepare myself, or I better capture some of the happiness of this moment and put it in my battery so that when, the down or the depression comes after it, I've saved a little bit in my battery to, kind of ameliorate or try and, minimize how low the low is. So I think in our low points, it's very easy to focus on our failures rather than our successes. But every success I know grew out of failure. Don't dwell on those failures if you're learning the lessons from them that will result in the successes. And I'll also say there's nothing bad with dwelling on failure. There's nothing bad with dwelling on success. They are natural human instincts. It's just we shouldn't remain in either of those states for too long. So me, I'm quite happy to be, at a low point for a week, for a month. But then after that, I know I've got to pull myself out of it. And there's a lot I learn in that low point. I'm not trying to avoid those low points. I know that they will come. And let's say, for instance, you lose your father, or you lose your mother, you lose your wife, you lose a child, you lose your brother, you lose your sister, you lose a business, you know what I mean? In life, we can lose many things, and we can't pretend that those things don't have an impact on our entire sense of well-being. Mm-hmm. So, it's okay for those things to happen. It's okay for us to feel depressed in those moments. It's just that we cannot afford to stay there for very long. Mm-hmm. We've got to learn the lesson and then try and use the lessons of that low point to dig ourselves out. So, some people say, oh, don't think negative thoughts. I don't believe in that. I believe try and think positive thoughts most of the time, but you must also allow those negative thoughts into your mind because they are coming from somewhere. And the negative thoughts and the positive thoughts, they all come from the same place. If you block one channel, all right, I'm going to block my mind to negative thoughts. You're also blocking your mind to positive thoughts. Rather, let them all in and I will deal with them. But I want them all. I want all the stimulus. I want all the energy to flow in. I don't want to block some off because I'm trying to block others. So, and I think the same applies to a great extent for me, even in my daily life, that I see all human beings as being equal. I think I can learn from everybody. I think everybody has something to give me. Mm-hmm. It may not be money, it may not be, but there is something that I will acquire in an exchange with everybody. And I don't think we should revere some people and dismiss others. I think every human being is very similar. Mm-hmm. And every human being's potential is very similar. It's not because I'm wearing a batakari or I'm bare-chested that what is inside me or what is in my brain changes. It's exactly the same. So,
that being said, I wonder, because I've had conversations with people who say that they feel like foreigners come to Ghana or the diaspora come to Ghana and have a better chance of success than the locals who were born and raised here. Even though some of the locals are just as bright, just as brilliant, somebody will come from outside and they'll be able to build success, by whatever the world standards of success is when it comes to growing a business or whatever it may be. Why do you think that is?
I think that argument is misleading. I don't actually believe it is true. It is true for some circumstances. It is also very untrue for others. You see, there are four things at play. One is coming from outside Ghana can give you access to more capital than someone in Ghana. If I have to borrow money in Ghana, it's 38% a year, but I can borrow money in America at 2% a year, right? So access to capital is one, or let's even call it access to finance, because if I take a handful of my friends in one environment, they have access to credit, right? So somebody can say, oh, I think this project will work. I'll put $5,000 into this project. I'll just load it onto my credit card, right? So That's why I said access to money, access to capital, access to finance, they're different. There is also something that happens when you leave an environment and move to another. So if I leave Ghana and I go to Nigeria, the first thing I will notice about Nigeria is the things that are different from Ghana. And the second thing I'll notice about Nigeria is the things we have in Ghana that Nigeria doesn't have. So when you come from the outside, you see business opportunities that people in this environment don't see. So those are the two advantages, capital and vision. Even me, it's when I go to another environment, I see opportunities there because I'm coming from a different space. When I come back to Ghana, I also see opportunities because I've been in a different space for a while. So this works both ways. However, somebody coming from the diaspora, the disadvantages they have, they don't have the same connections. Myself, for instance, I can't go to the passport office without seeing somebody that I know. So if I need to, and some of them are my childhood friends, some of them are my friends I've come across just in life generally. Some of them work in the passport office. Some of them work in the licensing office. Some of them work in the Bank of Ghana. So things that I need from these spaces, I have a friend or an associate that will make access easier. So this is where the Ghanaian, indigenous Ghanaian businessman has an advantage. The other place where the Ghanaian has an advantage is we understand what I call the Kwekwanansi mentality, right? I have lived and worked in Europe and America, and I don't have to make allowances for Kwekwanansi. When I'm working here in Ghana, I have to make allowances for Kwekwanansi.
And somebody who doesn't know what Kwekwanansi, what is that?
Kwekwanansi is a trickster. So Kwekwanansi is the person who is trying to get more out of the current situation than is due to them by virtue of their contribution. So the Kwekwanansi syndrome can happen where you're running a successful business. You think your accountant has paid your electricity, your rent, your fuel bill, and the money you owe the car dealers. One morning, the accountant doesn't come to work, and you realize that for the last 1.5 years, the accountant has channeled all of the money he was supposed to be spending on certain things, and which somehow he had convinced you he'd been doing all this time. And he will do it until the day the car company is coming to the office to come to find out what's going wrong. So this is Kwekwanansi. It happens in sometimes I work in hospitality. Kwekwanansi means you bring empty bottles to work, right? Kwekwanansi means I've done an event and some of the staff had buried bottles in the garden. So they have to come back because they might get searched on the way out, but they are going to come back tomorrow or the next day or the day after to come and dig out what they've hidden in the garden. And I'm not saying Europeans don't do this or Americans don't do this, but they don't, right? It's not that they are not smart enough to think about these things, or it's not that they don't wish they could make more money from this opportunity that they have. But there is a sense of responsibility, or there is a sense that I cannot afford to destroy the system because I am a beneficiary of the system. So this comes back to what I said in the beginning, is that here in Ghana, we think our job is to break or destroy the system because we don't understand that we are beneficiaries of the system. So, there are things. I mean, I have a friend who owns articulated lorries. And if the articulated lorry gets a big trip from here to Kumasi, from here to Burkina Faso, from here to Mali, to Niger, which happens often, you're not going to see the driver for a few days. But when he comes back, he's coming back with plenty of money because it was a big trip. So my friend who's the truck owner, it's for a long period of time, the drivers would come, oh, Charlie, today no work, or small work. And then he put trackers on each of his trucks. And then he realized that sometimes when the driver comes to see me in the evening to say, oh, today there was very little work or there's not much work, the driver has given the car to someone else to drive to Mali. So he's coming to report every day there's no work, but the truck is on its way to Mali. And that journey to Mali can take 7 days, 5 days. So every day, this man is coming, oh, today things didn't go well, or work was slow. It's not true. This is, ask anybody who has, the transport business was barely viable before trackers came into being. Post trackers, the transport business is profitable, right? So if the transport business wasn't profitable because there were no trackers, the difference between profitability and non-profitability is the individual, right? And I'm afraid the vast majority of us do not trust each other, and for good reason. If I steal from you, I won't go and tell people I stole from Ivy. I'll say, oh, I've outsmarted her, right? So this is our culture.
That's so bad.
Yeah. If somebody steals from you, I outsmarted you.
That's so bad. And this is one of the things that sometimes the diaspora who's coming to Ghana say that they don't like about Ghana. And then warning people.
So
how do you succeed in a system like this?
You waste a lot of energy putting precautions in place. I consider it to be a waste of energy. And you need to learn the extent to which you can trust every single individual that you deal with, right? I have people I've worked with for 20 years, and I can put my hand on my heart and say, I trust them with my lives, right? And there are not many of them, but let's say I give somebody 1,000 cedis and he comes back and he says, the thing costs 900 cedis. I use 70 cedis for change. There's 30 cedis left over. There are some people who I don't even question what they've just told me, because over 15 or 18 or 20 years, they have shown to me that they are not trying to steal from me. But they are a tiny fraction of the people that I have to work with in order to survive. So I would say 90% of the people that I have to work with, I have to put precautions in place to make sure that they can't sink my ship. And it's only 10% of the people who I don't waste time putting precautions in place. So now imagine if I could save the amount of time and energy I used to put precautions in place over the other 90%. I would be far more efficient as a human being. I'd be far more efficient as a business. I'd be far more efficient as a supplier. But the reality is that most people have been taught, both by the colonial system and by the colonial education, that stealing is outsmarting someone. And this is unique. It is unique to ex-colonies and post-colonial countries, because this culture doesn't exist. I mean, I've worked behind a bar in England. Sure, you guys, it's, at the end of the day, there'll be some little pool, and one or two of your friends will come in and you'll give them a free drink. Happens everywhere in the world, right? If your bar losses are 5, 7, 10%, it's okay, because the margin on a bar is 100%. So you can afford to lose 5% of that. But I haven't worked in a bar in England where the owner can go away and come back 1 year later and they'll tell him, in the entire time you are gone, we didn't sell a single bottle of Black Label. Because every bottle of Black Label they've sold since he was away, they brought in and sold. It doesn't happen. And it's not because the workers in Europe understand if we steal beyond a certain amount, the entire business will collapse. Or it's not because the workers in Ghana don't understand it. It's just that we have been taught to beat the system every opportunity we get, whether we are part of the system or not. So sometimes we are fighting against ourselves. We are stealing from ourselves. But we are stealing from ourselves because we are stealing our own future. Imagine you work for a company and because you are stealing 1,000 CDs from that company every month, in 6 months' time, the company collapses. And it happens. So many companies have collapsed because of Kwekwa Nancy, right? So I think that is a unique problem. Ghana has it, Nigeria has it, South Africa has it, to a lesser extent. But it is the legacy that colonialism left us with. One is a very unhealthy level of competition between us. So we are so busy competing against each other that we forget we're competing with the world. And we waste our energy competing with each other. And also trying to steal from each other as a symbol of how smart we are. Because that is what the colonialists came and did to us. So I do think we've got to address this issue because we can't continue sweeping it under the carpet. And the solution, once again, is in our primary schools. There's ethics, there's morality, there is, what is right. What is right is for you is what is right for me. So I do think we need to change our current system. And it will take 50, 70, 100 years, but we need to start doing it now. Because we cannot keep teaching our children that the way forward is stealing from each other. And we can't waste so much energy preventing people from stealing from us. So, I always say this is the direct result of 1 + 1 = 2. So if I truly believe that when you and I work together, the result will be 2. And when we share that, I'll end up with 1 and you end up with 1. Now, what's the point of collaborating? What's the point of us working together? So we need to be taught 1 + 1 = 10. If you and I work together, we'll achieve 10. Even if you cheat me and take 6, I'll still end up with 4. And that's a lot better than the 1 I could have done on my own.
Right. So I want to know, what do you want to be remembered for? Your legacy?
Well, I'd like to be remembered for being a good father by my children. That matters much more to me than the rest. But if there's anything, it's that I tried to add value to culture in order to add value to myself. So when I'm doing it, I'm very aware of the fact that if the value of Ghana's culture increases, the value of myself as an individual also increases. So like most things, if you want something to succeed, find a selfish reason for everyone to do it. So I understand that what I'm doing is of benefit to everyone, but the benefit that it is to me is enough for me to motivate myself to do it. So I think adding value to our indigenous Ghanaian products, whatever they happen to be. And art and culture, of course, is my field, and so that's where most of it is.
Awesome. And art and culture, tradition, ironically, are what makes Ghana win. When it comes to tourism, when it comes to the diaspora wanting to come to Ghana, despite all of the challenges in the country that people face, they still keep coming back. They still make the decision they want to live here, even with some of the challenges like the Kweku Anansi mindset. They want to be here. And one of the top reasons is peace of mind and culture. Ghana is winning on culture. I met a South African woman who came here and said, Ghana has something about its culture. Even though every African country has culture, there's something about the way Ghanaians are with their culture that is winning. So
I agree with that.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. So yeah, it's been a really great conversation today. His name is Panji Anoff. If you want to look him up, he has done so many things in this country when it comes to being a cultural shift shaper and
Social engineer,
social engineer,
cultural engineer is what I think of myself as sometimes.
contributing to so many things creative in this country. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. And don't forget to share, like, and to subscribe. I'll see you next time.